such a vital issue this morning.
Thank you. I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered UK support for stability in Libya. Daniel Kawczynski.
Thank you very much, Ms Madonna, for calling me in this important debate, and I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman for securing this debate. My strong interest in this country stems from my childhood experiences. As the only Conservative Member of Parliament to have been born in a communist country, communist Poland, of course, difficult to explain to young people today, but there was no food in the shops. Everything was rationed. You couldn't get chocolate or exotic fruits or anything like that. And my aunt and uncle were sent to work in Libya, in Tripoli, and they used to send back cases of oranges. Now, for a child in communist Poland, oranges were like something extraordinary from outer space because you couldn't see them, you couldn't buy them. So I took them to school. We drew paintings of the oranges. We made marmalade out of the peel. We talked about Libya. We looked at Libya on the map, and we thought of Libya as some sort of a paradise, because it had these exotic fruits which we in communist Poland couldn't have. And that's why I became chairman of the all-party group for Libya in 2006, shortly after being elected. And then I decided to write a book on Colonel Gaddafi, and I wish I had brought it here. It's in my office. I forgot to bring it here. But I wrote a book about Libya because I was extremely concerned at the rapprochement that Mr. Blair, the then Labour Prime Minister, was implementing in trying to bring Gaddafi in from the cold. We all remember the scenes of Mr. Blair smiling with Colonel Gaddafi in the tent outside Tripoli. And I felt that that was the wrong approach, bearing in mind all the outstanding issues that we had with Colonel Gaddafi. Simply to bring him in from the cold without dealing with these outstanding issues, I think was wrong. But more importantly, I think the Arab world thought it was wrong. And Colonel Gaddafi was perceived as a recalcitrant, unstable, highly unreliable individual within the Arab world itself and within Arab leaders. And for the United Kingdom to have so clearly bent over backwards to accommodate this man, many people in the Arab world at the time felt was inappropriate. I tried to campaign on this issue with the then Labour Prime Minister and the Labour Foreign Secretary and got absolutely nowhere. And that's why I decided to write the book. And I have to say it was a fascinating experience because, as the honourable gentleman from Northern Ireland has already stated, there are so many outstanding issues which were left unresolved. And of course, Lockerbie, the worst terrorist atrocity on UK soil, was as a result of Colonel Gaddafi sponsoring the bombing of this airliner over Scotland in 1988. The funding of the IRA, the sending of Semtex to the IRA. But the most poignant issue that I came across during my time of writing this book was the murder of PC Yvonne Fletcher in St James's Square, just outside the Libyan embassy. And I still now, when I go through St James's Square, pause for a moment in that beautiful plaque that is there commemorating PC Yvonne Fletcher. She was a serving police officer guarding a demonstration outside the Libyan People's Bureau when somebody from the embassy shot her dead. And I've met with Mr. Murray, PC Murray, who was there at the scene. He was with PC Yvonne Fletcher in the ambulance as she was being taken to hospital. And he has led a decades-long campaign to try to find the killer of PC Yvonne Fletcher, have him brought back to justice here in the United Kingdom. And for her memory, as a serving police officer, we must always continue to raise this issue in the House of Commons. But the revolution came in 2011, 1 year after I wrote my book. And of course, we had wall-to-wall coverage, February 2011. I remember it so well. We had wall-to-wall coverage on our television screens of the revolution that had started in Tobruk and started to sweep across the whole of Libya. And there was a sort of scenario whereby here in the House of Commons, this disaster is happening, something must be done about it. And Mr. Cameron, and I'm not prone to criticising Conservative politicians, but I will do on this occasion, but Mr. Cameron, the former Conservative Prime Minister, intervened and planned the invasion with Monsieur Hollande, the French president, I think on the back of a fag packet, without any consideration. Very easy to kill the dictator, but what happens when you cut off the head? All the tentacles collapse. And as the honourable gentleman has been to Libya, I've been to Libya as well on many occasions, and I see how that country, like Iraq, exactly like Iraq, almost a carbon copy of President Saddam Hussein in Iraq, everything was controlled by that one man. All the apparatus across the country was controlled by one party and one man. And so, Mr. Cameron, I remember it well, we were whipped to vote for the invasion. I think from memory there was a handful of Conservative MPs, just a handful of Conservative MPs who rebelled. And I very much regret that I wasn't one of them. I think these Conservative MPs at the time who rebelled against Mr. Cameron absolutely got it right, because there was not enough planning for this invasion of Libya. And we bombed Libya back to the Stone Age. Very easy to take on somebody like Colonel Gaddafi with obsolete Soviet-era equipment, poor radar, tanks and all the rest of it. So we bombed Libya back to the Stone Age, but with very little thought as to what would follow. And I asked to see Mr. Cameron 2 or 3 days before Colonel Gaddafi was killed. I went into his office, and I knew he wasn't listening to a word I was saying, Miss Madonna. And the reason I knew he wasn't listening to a word I was saying is because throughout the whole of the conversation, he was signing bottles of House of Commons scotch for raffle prizes and auction prizes. And you rather know somebody's not listening to you when at the same time as you're trying to raise important issues with them, they're doing a secondary task, which is signing their name on bottles of House of Commons scotch. And I said to him at the time, what is going to happen to Colonel Gaddafi? You're there? Thank you very much. My book on Colonel Gaddafi, which I wrote in 2010. So I spent over 2 years writing this book. So that's just evidence there. Sorry? And basically, in reality, I said, what is going to happen to Colonel Gaddafi? And we all know how Gaddafi was killed. It was French and British intelligence that ultimately collaborated to ensure that the militants found him. There was a convoy leaving Sirte to the desert. British and French military intelligence in collaboration with the militants got him there in the tunnel, and then he was killed. Of course he had to be killed. Some people said he had to be silenced. He knew too much. The honourable gentleman remembered the allegations about all the funding from Colonel Gaddafi to Monsieur Sarkozy. Apparently Gaddafi gave Sarkozy millions of dollars for political campaigns. So he had to be silenced. And Mr. Cameron said to me, I think the words, I will never forget it, no need to worry. He sort of metaphorically patted me on the head and said, nothing to worry about, it's all in hand, old boy. Well, then, of course, 2 or 3 days later, Colonel Gaddafi was killed. Now, I'm no apologist for Colonel Gaddafi. This was a brutal, evil dictator who suppressed his own people. And my book chronicles the extraordinary human rights abuses that this dictator implemented against his own people in Libya. Nobody here is going to shed a tear that Colonel Gaddafi is no longer running Libya, or that Colonel Gaddafi is longer able to suppress his own people. But the reason I raise it is because we have to really, in reality, think about the mistakes that we are making as a nation, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's in Libya. Every time we have intervened in an Arab nation, rather than leaving it to the Arab League, rather than leaving it to the Arab people, every time, certainly in my time as a Member of Parliament in this chamber, that we have intervened in an Arab nation and killed the dictator, what has ensued? Total chaos, total paralysis, an internecine warfare, and the brutality and killing that one could argue of even greater consequence and destabilization that had taken place before under the dictator. And I think for future generations of members of Parliament, I very much hope that they will learn from our experiences and the mistakes that we have made. When I was on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in that very brief Parliament from 2015 to 2017, there was an attempt to investigate Mr. Cameron. There was an attempt at that stage to investigate how he had brought us to intervening in Libya, but in reality, it got us nowhere and very little was done. I would like to put on the record, Ms. Madonna, how deeply disappointing it is that there are so few members of Parliament here, and not even one Conservative member of Parliament in this chamber, apart from the Minister and the Parliamentary Private Secretary, bearing in mind the responsibility that we have as a party and as a government for the intervention in this country, and bearing in mind the extraordinary misery that the Libyan people continue to experience today as a result of our intervention. I think that's a very bad show on behalf of my party. I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman for bringing this debate here, despite all the difficulties that we are experiencing at the moment in Israel and the Gaza Strip, despite all the difficulties that we are seeing in Ukraine. We must not forget about Libya. These are our neighbours in the underbelly of the Mediterranean, a country that is being used now as a result of our intervention for massive trafficking of people from sub-Saharan Africa through Libya to Lampedusa and beyond. And we, as British parliamentarians, particularly after our intervention in that country, have a duty and a responsibility to continue to help the people of Libya. Thank you.